Baby, come give me something, oh. Baby, come give me something, oh. Cause I can't stop loving.
I know you like my LEQ, so tell me what you wanna do. When I make the stuff, is it good enough? When I give this knowledge, will you like it up? I make these screencasts, that's right, just for you. You ain't ready for this work, now watch my LEQ. LEQ, 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 LEQ.
Welcome to our digital LEQ video. This topic is on industrialization effects on migration patterns. Now, before we get into all the information, I just want to introduce you to three main questions that will be answered throughout the duration of our video. The first one is, what were the major push and pull factors that affected migration patterns during the industrialization period? The second question, how was migration viewed to lawmakers, or the government, so to speak? The final question is, why did women assume bigger roles within their households? Like I stated before, these questions will be answered throughout the duration of our video. Please make sure to pay attention and jot down any notes where you see fit. Now, jumping right into our information, I'll give you a little preview. So, evidence proves that Britain was formerly the first country to start the Industrial Revolution. Due to Britain's multitude of power, they had an advantage by having control over regions such as North America, South Africa, Egypt, India, and Australia. Therefore, Britain would obtain natural resources from those regions and use them in factory occupations. Now, we look at this first visual representation of patterns of global migration between 1840 to 1900. This map basically gives you general information about how many people moved to specific locations during this time period. Our second map kind of depicts the same thing. It points out two major population movements between 1500 and 1914. But at the bottom, the text states around 30 million people left Europe between 1815 and 1914 bound for the United States. And this was due to rising unemployment at home in times of economic depression. So now hopping into our topic, in the period of 1750 and 1900, industrialization resulted in technological advances and demographic changes that reshaped how humans interact with their environment. Develop an argument that evaluates relative significance of the effects of industrialization on patterns of migration from 1750 to 1900. So from this topic, we developed the thesis statement that states the push factors of migration patterns during the industrialization era included employment/opportunities, safety, poverty, and forced migration. These main reasons caused major relocation for individuals and families seeking better opportunities. However, reforms such as the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and the White Australia Policy were set to halt continuous migration into their countries. Therefore, both push and pull factors impacted the industrialization's era's effect on migration patterns between 1750 and 1900.
Push and pull factors. Push factors could be described as anything that would make you want to leave your country. So if the population were to increase, there would be not enough food for everyone or not enough medicine. If the transportation became cheaper, that also played a part in being a push factor, because then there wouldn't be enough transportation for everyone. That also has a result of the population increase. An example of political unrest would be a revolution. And regional persecution would be anti-Jewish programs. The Irish potato famine, also known as the Great Hunger, is also a push factor that was happened in Ireland. And the lack of employment can also be a factor of pushing one away from its country. Pull factors would be anything that would bring you closer to another country or attract you to another country. So urbanization, cheaper farmland, better economic opportunities, political and religious freedom, and the abolition of slavery are all pull factors that will make you want to go to another country.
Ethnic enclaves. Due to lack of employment Chinese immigrants relocated to areas such as North America, Australia, and Western South America. During the time of migration, the Chinese found occupations within the gold rush in North America and Australia. Also, within North America, Chinese immigrants worked on farms and the construction of railroads. A small portion of the Chinese migration population relocated towards Southeast Asia to engage in government jobs and hold colonial power. While in Indochina, migrants engaged in commerce. In Malaya, they held significance in the opium distribution, all while running farms. The reasoning and analysis for these Chinese enclaves are that these effects on industrialization and patterns of migration from 1750 to 1900 was a major part of the Great Migration. Chinese immigrants either served as indentured servants in Cuba, Peru, and British Caribbean, or worked low-wage occupations in the California gold rush. Their migration from China visibly increased the population and added diversity. Italian enclaves. Because of the dire of poverty at home, a great number of Italian immigrants were forced to move to Argentina and New York in hopes of salvation from poverty. Poverty not only forced Italian immigrants to relocate, but the widespread of disease, poor soil, and an abundant amount of peasants caused such an impact on the Great Migration. Italian immigrants migrated to New York because it was in a raging city with lots of factory work opportunities. Italian enclaves' effects on industrialization and patterns of migration from 1750 to 1900 was a major part of the Great Migration as well. Italian immigrants fled to New York horrible conditions and poverty. Little Italy were stationed enclaves in the following cities: the Bronx, Bay Ridge in Brooklyn, and Staten Island. Tenement living conditions were overcrowded, disease-filled, and criminal-oriented.
Gender roles. Women had to take on larger roles, making them become the head of the household while men worked. Some women worked in factories to provide for their families, while children, typically boys, began to work as well. One counteract of migration was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. The act was the first immigration law to exclude an entire ethnic group, which were Chinese immigrants. This act excluded the immigrants from their rights of citizenship. In the beginning, the act was only set in place for Chinese immigrants that did not obtain the occupations of a teacher, merchant, official, or traveler. The image provided was an original poster excluding Chinese immigrants, and it provides historical evidence towards our counteracts. This also provides the effect of industrialization in migration. Another counteract was the White Australia policy of 1901. The act was set in place to allow immigration officials the power to make any non-European migrant sit and take a 50-word dictation test that was only in the European language. This test was problematic towards immigrants due to the following conditions of origin of country, criminal record, and medical history. For this lesson, we came up with 3 main themes. Our first theme was humans in the environment. Population sizes in different countries changed due to mass migration movements. Therefore, there is a major impact on how individuals interacted with their new environment. Our next theme was economic systems because new services were made for migrants, such as labor contracts and indentured servitude. Our last theme was technology and innovation. Humans migrating to new places and interacting with their new environments led to technological advancements such as railroads and factory machines to make life easier. Contextualization. During 1750 to 1900, there was a great amount of migration. Causes of this substantial movement were that individuals wanted freedom of persecution, new economic opportunities, and escape from war in their homelands. These reasons made individuals of the same lifestyles and beliefs move near each other in areas called enclaves. The effects of enclaves were that people in the groups shared their ideas with each other and had an influence on the foods, music, and languages in the new lands.
This source explains the different types of enclaves that were formed in the U.S. due to migration.
The next source is showing an ad made during the industrialization period that excludes Chinese people from migrating.
The next source is a secondary source showing the effects of migration. The effect that was explained within this source was the Irish potato famine.
This source is a recreated image of the White Australia policy.
And this last source contains different primary sources, including pictures and news articles during the industrialization revolution. These sources show what practices were abundant during the Industrial Revolution, including labor in the factory systems. In addition, it showed new machinery that were invented, such as the mill.